they form, I think, particular parts of what looks to be a central theme that you're bringing.
Yeah.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak to it?
I'm just concerned that there are many service users in my area and other area in the borough that are being hit now by the privatization, effectively, of social services for people with complex disabilities and with severe learning disabilities to Your Choice Barnet, which is failing, has been failing since day one. Recently we heard that support workers were facing 9.5% cuts in their pay. We already witnessed a huge turnover of staff, which obviously affects very negatively on the quality of care. These services, when they were in-house, where Diamond was, and there are a few parents in the audience, I know people who are using the services, they were really commended. They are deteriorating now, and I'm concerned about what's the council going to do to implement their duty of care. That's one question. Another question was, will the council consider, as was promised in the full business case before outsourcing Your Choice Barnet, to bring these services back in-house, because at the moment the situation is to the detriment of the service users. And yeah, I think this is the gist of what I'm asking. How are you going to safeguard these vulnerable people, our neighbors, our friends, and to fulfill your duty of care? And why don't you bring back in-house those services to ensure good employment conditions and fair salaries to the workers, so that they can go on providing the good services that we used to provide?
Thank you for being so concise as well. Would you like to address that?
I'm happy to address it because whilst I've only seen this in coming to the meeting, I am very aware of the issues, and there aren't too many more specifics within there over and above issues that have previously been addressed. But I will address each of the questions that you've raised because they are really important. So the first question that you have is, how will Barnet Council protect residents from a decline in quality of service resulting from Your Choice Barnet's treatment of the care workers employed to look after them? It is fair to say that in the world of social care, it's not about technology that makes a difference about whether somebody receives a good service. It is about the quality of the interaction between the support giver and the person receiving care. And it's absolutely kind of fundamental. We hear that over and over again, but that is what really makes a difference. And we see people motivated predominantly by that as the reason why they go into their line of work than they do about the money and the wages that are paid. And actually across adult social care, staff working in Your Choice Barnet, compared to other services that we currently pay and contract with, have enjoyed a higher level of salary remuneration than others working in other parts of the social care sector. And that is a fact compared to other people working in social care in organisations run by the not-for-profit sector and also by the for-profit sector.
Can you say that? Justifiably for the level of interaction and support that we're given, will you agree?
I would say that we benchmark our prices according to a tool which is called the Care Funding Calculator, which is applied to all of our contracts and all of our services. It is a national tool which works out what is a fair price for care based on looking at what the costs are for providers and the salary and market conditions.
So why can't it buy 10%?
Why can't it buy 10%? Mrs. Faisal, I'm happy to let you have a response again at the end because you've got 3 questions in a bundle here, so I've got no problem letting you come back again. But if you wouldn't interrupt, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
In terms of the amount of 2181, that was the cost of the unit cost of the hourly rate for staff and service user support. And the Care Funding Calculator looks at a unit price of £18 hands, and that is the basis upon which we contract with all other providers within Barnet. 6% of the total adult social care purchasing relates to Your Choice Barnet. 94% of it relates to services that are provided by the not-for-profit sector and for the independent sector. And it's therefore, in terms of our contracting, we treat all providers exactly the same in order for there to be choice and an open marketplace for the delivery of care.
It's actually flawed
This is
business. I'm sorry.
We are not able,
This is
under the
flawed
rules of
business
state
model, and
aid,
these
under the
workers
rules of
pay the
state
price.
aid,
You're
treat
failing
one
to write
provider
that.
more favourably than another provider. And that is why Your Choice Barnet are seeking to bring their unit costs in line with other care providers. Now, some of the reasons why their unit costs are high have been because of higher rates of overhead costs that come from being a public sector organisation than in a private sector organisation or a charity. And that they need to focus first of all on whether they can reduce those non-related pay over costs, overheads. And they are committed to doing that. I do think that the correlation between seeing that quality is always linked to pay rates doesn't actually stand up to closer scrutiny.
Because they have consciously
when you look at actually the CQC ratings of a range of providers, that you would not have seen that the in-house services consistently scored higher ratings than other providers. That is the independent measure of
let's take care of it. Almost nothing
that is statutory and regulatory framework for the delivery of adult social care.
You had a relative that's been cared by somebody that's paid
Well,
an absolute
that's
nuisance.
People didn't interrupt whilst you were speaking before. I'm happy to let you have an opportunity to speak afterwards. It would be great if you didn't interrupt while people were speaking. Thank you.
Sometimes it's hard to restrain themselves.
Well, you're just going to have to learn how to.
Oh, perhaps you'd like to teach me, Councillor.
Yeah, that would be outside this meeting.
I'm not promising anything.
No.
I'm really pleased that the strike action that was proposed by Unison today has been able to be held off following constructive talks with Your Choice Barnet and Unison through ACAS. And I know that further talks are going to continue to see if there are alternative ways to be able to reduce the unit cost for these services going forward. And so, that is something for those talks to be resolved, because I am sure that actually strike action has a detrimental impact on the quality of services for services.
But let's get rid of the right to strike.
What I can say is that the proposals from Your Choice Barnet do ensure that staff are continue to be paid the London living wage. And that is an aspiration that we have for our range of other social care contracts. But in order to implement that across all adult social care contracts, has a very hefty price tag associated with it. It is something that I'm very interested and want to explore doing. But actually, in order to achieve that, there would need to be very significant investment into adult social care at a time where we know that those resources aren't there, at a time when we're also needing to deal and respond to more people requiring our services. To turn to the question about would the service ever be bought back in-house, like all council services, like all services that the council funds that meet the needs of vulnerable people, if a provider got into extreme difficulty and could no longer discharge its responsibilities, the council remains the provider of last resort for all, to ensure that the needs of all adult social care service users are met. Your Choice represents 6% of the total purchase spend. We are not looking at bringing that back in-house, nor are we looking at bringing back the 94% of other council business that is currently provided under contract with a range of providers. The provider is able to meet the needs of individuals, and our duty of care we will continue to discharge through regular assessments of need, through effective contract monitoring and liaison with the provider, and making sure that we're constructively finding a solution to move through on this industrial dispute that exists within Your Choice Barnet at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Canali. I've got three members who I think, Mr. Musgrave, did you identify you wanted to speak? If I can ask no, then if it's too late, if we can be very brief, then I'll let Mrs. Weisel have an opportunity to reply back, and then you have a response, and then hopefully an opportunity for you to have the last two items. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Janet Solomon. I do have a son who currently uses one of the services in Your Barnet. I've got three quick questions really. You're talking about comparing like for like, are you? When you're talking about social care, are we actually talking about comparing the salaries of people who work in centres for people with profound and multiple learning disabilities with those particular workers? You're talking about social care staff, which obviously well they're covering a very wide range. You know, somebody who's just going into someone's house, an older person who has minimal needs, cannot be compared with somebody who is working with the type of people that we're now discussing.
Yes.
So the question is that like for like?
Yes, it is. It's the care funding calculator that is applied to services for people with learning disabilities, including complex disabilities.
Right, that's specifically that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is you talked about reducing overheads.
Yes.
My question is really to what extent can Barnet Council actually direct that? Because clearly that didn't happen before. If you're saying, and I totally agree, overheads do need to be reduced, but if we're talking about top salaries, can Barnet Council not actually direct YCB to take the cuts needed at that level and the backroom staff, if you like, rather than the direct care staff? It seems extraordinary that that's the sort of staff who are expected to take these cuts.
Can I ask what just come at the end of all three points, I think?
Sorry, yeah. And the last point, which was on the London living wage, it just seems not improbable that if other local boroughs are offering London living wage, as some are, that staff will, not surprisingly, leave Barnet to go to where they can actually get the London living wage. And how do you actually stop that if it's such a problem?
Thank you,
There's
Mr.
nothing.
My name is Tony Solomons. Two very brief points. First point is we've heard some arithmetic from Ms. Canali. Does she realise that the damage that has already been done to many of the service users because of the demoralisation and the demotivation of staff and the backfilling of experienced staff with agency people who do not understand our children or our siblings? The second point I'd like to make is if and when YCB goes bust, which is the most likely scenario? It goes back in-house or it's flogged off to Capita?
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Mr. Number two. This is the last item.
Well, really reiterate one of the important questions that my friends here brought up is to ask why don't, if you need to recover the cost, why don't you and the directors and the executives of Your Choice Barnet take the pay cut, as Janet suggested. And the other point, I actually would like to use the opportunity and direct to Kat McGill and her colleagues. Will you consider bringing back in-house Your Choice Barnet services if or when you're in power, as we are now in an almost council?
Although I'm sure Councillor would be happy to answer a question if you can try to direct them towards the four officers who are here.
Just using the
opportunity. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Nutt.
So the first question was around overhead costs, and it's a really important question because we want to make sure that as much money is going into frontline care as we possibly can. And what the care funding calculator does is that it breaks down not only to do the costs that are around the time, the one-to-one time, the interaction time, but it also looks at actually how the overhead costs compare with other providers. So that is the objective way in which we analyse this. I'll be happy separately to send you through kind of what the care funding calculator looks at so that you can actually see how those issues are picked up. And what we do with each provider is we ask them to make sure that their price for how they deliver care is in line with the care funding calculator. That's the basis upon which that we then contract. Different providers will have slightly different configurations as to how they apportion out costs. So we look at the bottom line figure, but within that we look to see our overheads where we expect them to generally be. in order to make that decision. Is this provider giving us value for money? So we go into an awful lot of detail to be able to answer and address.
Can I just ask on this point, does that include
Can I ask
provision of corrections?
Can I just pick up on that very quickly? And those overheads, I mean, can you actually then say, I'm sorry, I don't think you're doing it as we would want you to?
Absolutely.
And then they,
And that would be an area that through our contract negotiations, that we then say, what are you doing about this? What's your plans in terms of how you're addressing this in order to make sure that we're getting the right price? And the overhead issues vary from provider to provider. If you're a private provider, we look at actually what's the level of profit that you're making. If you're a public sector provider, we'll be looking at other overheads that might be about, the cost of the organisation as a whole. Are they being properly apportioned? So these are quite a lot of detail that we get into in exploring this. In respect to the London living wage and the problems, do we lose people going to other councils that commit to being London living wage? Well, a lot of councils, like Barnet, have actually given an exemption for adult social care. Even those kind of flagship boroughs that have put themselves forward because of actually the kind of the legacy that there's been around actually kind of the pay levels that there are in some of the directly provided care. So, for example, Camden has still got exemptions that link to adult social care. And, lots of us as directors of adult social services are very, we want to see it being extended, but we also have to kind of recognise the kind of what that means in terms of the money that is required to bring some of those salaries up to the London living wage. Now, the Care Act became law in May, and it's either Clause 5 or Section 5, you might have a look at it. It talks about what our responsibilities are around having a sustainable marketplace for care. And that is around actually challenging us to really look at the sustainability of the marketplace as a whole and whether the price that we're paying for care is correct. Now, directors of adult social services have estimated that in order to run that and to fully implement that, it will require a doubling of the amount of resources available for adult social care as a country. Now, I'm not able to say that that's something that we can do.
Sorry, to make a marketplace, you need a doubling.
No, it is to have a sustainable marketplace going forward that enables some of these challenges and issues to be addressed in a sustainable way. So it's about how care is provided and the price that as a society we're prepared to pay for the price. So we don't see this issue of leakage out to other boroughs with London living wage because actually they have some of the same challenges, and then we don't expect to see it for Your Choice Barnet because they are going to be paying a London living wage. The point around demoralisation though is a really important one, because I started off my remarks by saying that actually the quality of actually the service that people get is around actually, that human interaction, and that is something that we have to pay great attention to. We have to have people that feel proud of the job that they're doing, and I know that there's an awful lot of people that work in Your Choice Barnet who feel very proud and very loyal towards the services that they deliver. They need to also feel proud of the organisation that they work for and confident of their future, so that they're able to kind of commit into where they're going. And I think that that's something that we have to move forward when this dispute is resolved, to make sure that actually they continue to feel how optimistic and empowered around what they're doing. What they've done, one could argue, is that they have had to take a haircut in terms of their price, of their hourly rate. And that is a very big sacrifice that they have had to make. And on that basis, the workers, and going forward, I would like to see that as Your Choice Barnet grows and develops, to actually they can share in the benefits of that, because I think that is the right thing to do.
Yes,
And that is what I am.
it's a haircut, not a haircut.
wanting
It's not
to...
growing, it's failing. I mean, they're always rearranging.
No,
It's not.
I suspect there'll be a number of people who aren't entirely convinced, but I don't think that even with the best will in the world, we're going to convince everybody. I'd like now to have an opportunity to, if we have officers' responses on items 16 and 17, because
I'm deferring my response to Councillor Hallback.
The question to me, I'm deferring to Councillor Hallback.
I want to respond to Ms. Fiser's specific point about Labour's position is. First of
that's
all,
something you can do outside the forum. We're very,
If you don't mind.
you have plenty of time with them. And
I will be brief. I'll just say that we are very concerned by how the business model was put together in the first place. The fact that costs were moved from, payment moved from being a lump sum to being per use, and the effect that's had forcing the £1 million loan and all that has. And we do think the council should consider bringing back in-house amongst looking at how the
thank you very much, Councillor Hallback.
Barry Warren, because that's saying now.
Mr. Richardson is going to give a verbal response on items 16 and 17. If we bundle them, we will have an opportunity for them to be addressed to some extent before we finish the meeting, rather than leave until the next one.
We do have can I just clarify, sorry, when you requested information on what is being done in Finchley and Golders Green, do you mean Finchley and Golders Green area, or do you mean specifically the Finchley area and the Golders Green area?
Which question?
16.
No. In the Finchley and Golders Green, in the whole area, because I saw what was done in Dockridge and not in our wards.
Okay. In March of this year, the council via its area subcommittees agreed then plan maintenance programme for carriageway and footway. It agreed it's got a planned maintenance programme for carriageway and footway that does it on an annual basis. Effectively, what we do is we do an inventory and inspection of all the carriageways and footways in the borough. That then gives you a priority listing. What we then do is actually sense check it to say, are some of these roads actually in areas where there's a high footfall or in the vicinity of schools or hospitals, for example, so we call it a local usage factor. That gets added onto the list, and that informs the ultimate priority list of where we're going to carry out the work over the coming year. That is a publicly accessible document, and that can be perused at will. And effectively, it's all the streets and all the effectively carriageways and the footways that we plan to do work on. That's done on a needs basis. I accept that some roads visually don't look very well. You can get scarring from utility works, etc., where there's been trenching or trees, for example, where the roots have actually impacted on the footway. But if they don't actually meet certain criteria, we won't necessarily take any action at the time. And the available funding for the year is applied to those carriageways and footways where there is degradation. And we need to take action now to actually make improvements. So,
Can I just clarify, so was this done already, this survey? Are you saying
the survey is done annually, and that actually informs the priority listing.
But it can be changed, can't it, by a cabinet member as it was?
It can be changed normally if officers, if the money that's allocated turns out to be well spent and we actually make savings, we can actually seek a variation on the programme to get what we call the reserve
So
list.
like sort of 1.6 million in one ward and nothing in another.
Well, that conclusions could be drawn by actually looking at the priority listing, because all the detail and the actual condition surveys are actually held within the report. So that's actually
No great things in Collindale.
So as money does come available, if more money does come available in a year, then we go back to our list and say what other roads can be done. But we will react as well. So if there's, and this is done on an annual basis, carriageways and footways are notorious, whether it is the weather or just particularly high traffic usage. They do deteriorate, because sometimes we will step in and take action that we didn't know we were going to when the planning programme was formulated. So if there are particular instances where you think work should be carried out, then we have a process for that, and that will be reactive maintenance. There are what we call intervention levels, again going back to what I said regarding what can visually look unsightly, but unless there's actually an empirical or evidence-led approach to say this is a certain condition that we have to take action now, the chances are we won't, unfortunately, unless additional funding becomes available. I'm quite happy to get the document to you, it's about that thick, and each of the three... Well, each area subcommittee actually looks at the same document, but obviously each area has had particular interest in the roads that related to their area. It actually showed that it was on a needs basis rather than just allocating on an arbitrary basis to an area.
That's what happened just before Councillor Finchley.
It was just a very quick point hearing you speak. We used to get on a regular basis as ward councillors a list of all the highway works, footway and relays, and it was really useful because then when residents asked us all in about to take the payment, we could look and see it's coming up for renewal, when it's going to be repaired. It occurs to me that we haven't actually now been receiving those, but is that going to go back on the agenda?
Well, it should need to go back on the agenda because it should still be happening, so I'll have to take that back and find out why the updates aren't going around, so I'll certainly take that back, Councillor.
Yes. So,
Ms. Wiseman, I can give you 30 seconds and Mr. Richardson 30 seconds so that we can finish your time.
If I get my 30 seconds in first, is that okay?
sorry?
If I can get my 30 seconds in
No, because
first.
then you will not be able to answer what I'm going to ask you.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And I'm going to ask you what you mean by normally. So normally is the abnormal allocation to Golders Green or the linking wonderfully to the pavements on the side streets of Totteridge rather than my side street in Finchley where the pavement is such and my elderly neighbour often fall. Is this normally or would you like to explain what normally is?
So I take it it's a house estate, Councillor Thompson, and that's in your ward.
Yes.
Totally and utterly ignored.
But unfortunately, those people that decided to call out
And that's an example of my neighbour.
the time of this meeting needs to close sharp at 8:30, so this meeting is closed. Thank you very
Right,
much.
let's see. Well, Mr. Richardson did not answer.
And thank you all the members and residents who came on contributors. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Holt, for almost running over.